She was born like any other child, small and loud, with bright eyes that looked at the world with curiosity. In the beginning, nothing about her seemed different. Her mother used to say she smiled even before she learned how to walk. The house they lived in was small, with peeling paint and narrow rooms, but it was filled with warmth. Life was not easy, but it was simple, and for a while, that was enough. Everything changed one rainy afternoon when she was very young. The accident happened so fast that no one fully understood it until it was already over. Loud sounds, panic, people shouting her name. By the time she woke up in a hospital bed, the world felt quieter, heavier. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand tightly, trying not to cry. The doctors spoke gently, choosing words carefully, but the truth was hard. One of her legs could not be saved. At that age, she did not fully understand what it meant. She only knew something was missing. As days passed, she noticed how everyone looked at her with pity. Nurses smiled too much. Visitors spoke softly, as if she might break. Her mother stayed strong in front of her, but at night, when the lights were low, silent tears told a different story. When they finally returned home, nothing felt the same. The house was the same size, the walls the same color, but she felt smaller inside it. She learned to move again, slowly, painfully. Every step was a lesson in patience. Sometimes she fell. Sometimes she cried. And sometimes she laughed, because laughing felt easier than explaining the pain as she grew older. The world outside the house became harder than the injury itself. Children were curious, and curiosity was not always kind. At first, they stared. Then came the questions. Then came the silence. On her first day at school, she wore a clean dress and shoes her mother had saved months to buy. She stood at the gate, holding her mother's hand, feeling her heart beat too fast. Inside the classroom, she felt every eye on her. Some children whispered. Some pointed when they thought no one was watching. The teacher welcomed her with a smile, but quickly moved on, as if unsure how to handle her presence. When it was time to sit, no one chose the empty seat beside her. She sat alone, staring at her desk, pretending she didn't care. During breaks, watched other children run across the playground. Their laughter echoed like something from another world. She wanted to join them, but fear held her back. What if she fell? What if they laughed? So she stayed near the wall, tracing shapes in the dirt with her shoe, counting minutes until the bell rang. At home, her mother worked long hours, taking whatever jobs she could find. Some days she came home tired, her hands rough, her face lined with worry. She tried to hide her exhaustion, cooking simple meals and asking about school. The girl always answered the same way. It was fine. She never spoke about the stares or the loneliness. She did not want to be another burden. As years passed, rejection became something she expected. On buses, people avoided the seat next to her. In shops, strangers looked away quickly, uncomfortable. Some offered help she didn't ask for. Others pretended she wasn't there at all. Both made her feel the same, unseen. She learned to walk confidently with her artificial leg. But confidence on the outside did not mean peace on the inside. Every mirror reminded her of what she had lost. Every laugh from a group reminded her of what she was missing. She started believing that maybe she truly didn't belong anywhere. At school events, parents cheered loudly for their children. Her mother clapped too, but she was often late or too tired to stay long. The girl stood on the side, watching others receive praise, telling herself she didn't need it. Still, something inside her ached. There were nights when she lay awake, listening to distant traffic, wondering why life chose her. She never hated anyone. She never blamed anyone. She only questioned her own worth. If she were different, would people stay? Would they care? Despite everything, she tried to be kind. She helped classmates with homework. She shared snacks when she had extra. She smiled even when it hurt. Kindness became her shield. If she couldn't be accepted, she would at least be gentle. One afternoon after school, she sat alone on a bench near a small park. Children ran past her, their voices loud and careless. She hugged her bag close, watching the ground. She felt tired, not just in her body, but in her heart. Tired of being strong all the time? As the sun lowered, shadows stretched across the park. She didn't know it then, but this quiet moment was the last one she would spend feeling completely invisible. Somewhere nearby, a man was watching the same playground, carrying his own silent struggles. Their lives had not crossed yet, but fate was already moving, slowly and quietly, toward a change neither of them expected. The man came to the park almost every evening after work. He never rushed. He walked slowly, as if his mind was heavier than his body. His shirt was often wrinkled, his shoes worn, and his eyes carried a tired look that did not fade even when he smiled. People saw him as just another single father trying to manage life. But inside him lived a quiet emptiness that never truly left. He had not planned to stop at the park that day. It was simply on his way home. His child was staying with a neighbor, and the house felt too quiet to return to immediately. The park gave him noise, movement, something that reminded him. Life was still happening around him. That was when he noticed the girl. She sat on the same bench as before, her bag on her lap, her eyes fixed on the ground. There was nothing dramatic about her. She was not crying or calling for attention. It was her stillness that stood out. Children usually filled parks with motion, but she looked like someone who had learned to disappear. At first, he looked away. He had learned to mind his own business. Life had taught him that getting involved often came with pain, but something pulled his attention back. Maybe it was the way other children ran past her without noticing. Or maybe it was the familiar loneliness in her posture. He sat on a bench not too far away. He did not stare. He simply watched the playground, pretending he was waiting for someone. After a while, he noticed her adjusting her artificial leg carefully, making sure it was hidden under her clothes. The movement was practiced, careful, and full of quiet effort. He felt something tighten in his chest. He knew struggle. He knew what it meant to wake up every day carrying a weight no one else could see. After his wife passed away, life had not stopped for him. Bills still arrived. Work still demanded time. His child still needed him to be strong. Grief became something he carried silently, just like that girl carried her pain. Minutes passed. The girl did not move. The sun began to lower, and parents called their children home. The park slowly emptied. Finally, he stood up, unsure why his feet were moving in her direction. He stopped a few steps away, careful not to startle her. "Long day?" he asked casually, his voice gentle. She looked up, surprised. Adults usually spoke to her with pity or too much concern. His tone was different, simple, normal. She nodded once. Yes. He smiled lightly and gestured toward the empty space beside her. "Mind if I sit?" She hesitated, then shook her head. No. They sat in silence for a moment. He did not rush to fill it. Silence, he knew, could be comforting when it wasn't forced. "My kid loves this place," he said eventually. "Says the swings make worries disappear." She glanced at the swings where a few chains still moved in the wind. "I don't go on them." He didn't ask why. He simply nodded. Not everything is for everyone. That answer surprised her more than a question would have. They spoke about small things, school homework, how the park looked different in the evening. He didn't mention her leg. He didn't ask about the accident. He didn't lower his voice or choose careful words. He treated her like a person, not a problem. When it was time to leave, stood up and said, "I'm usually here around this time. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. Just thought I'd say that." She nodded again, watching him walk away. Something strange settled in her chest. Not fear, not hope, something in between. The next day she returned to the same bench without fully understanding why. And again, he appeared. This time, he brought 2 juice boxes. He placed one beside her without asking. "Extra," he said. She accepted it quietly. Days passed like this. Short conversations. Shared silence. No pressure. He never tried to fix her. Never told her she was brave. Never said everything would be okay. He simply showed up. At school, nothing changed right away. Children still whispered. Teachers still kept a distance. But inside her, something shifted. Knowing that one person saw her without judgment made the loneliness less heavy. One afternoon, she arrived at the park, upset. Her steps were slower, her eyes red. He noticed immediately, but did not push. "Rough day?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "They laughed today." He waited. "During sports," she continued, "they said I shouldn't even try." He felt anger rise, but he kept his voice calm. "What did you do?" "I walked away." "That takes strength too," he said. She looked at him, confused. "It doesn't feel like it." "Strength doesn't always feel strong," he replied. "Sometimes it feels lonely." Those words stayed with her. Slowly, she began to speak more. About her mother's long hours. About pretending to be okay. About nights when she felt invisible. He listened without interrupting, without trying to change the subject. In return, he shared pieces of his own life. Losing someone you love. Raising a child alone. Feeling like you're failing even when you're trying your best. They didn't call it anything. It wasn't friendship in the usual sense. It was simply two people sharing space without masks. People around the park noticed. Some smiled. Some judged. He didn't care. For the first time in a long while, he felt useful in a way that had nothing to do with work or responsibility. One evening, as the sky turned orange, she laughed at something he said. The sound surprised them both. It was light, real, and unfamiliar. As she walked home that day, her steps felt different. The world hadn't changed. People hadn't changed. But something inside her had she no longer felt completely alone, and she didn't know it yet. But this quiet bond was only the beginning of a life-changing connection that would soon challenge both of them in ways they'd never expected. The bond between the girl and the man grew slowly, almost like a river carving its path through the land. No one could see the changes at first, not even her mother. She still went to school each day, still faced whispers and stares, but inside, something shifted that made the world feel a little less heavy. They continued meeting at the park. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat quietly. He never pushed her to speak, never asked her to explain her feelings. Instead, he let her guide the conversation, offering his own experiences only when she seemed ready to hear them. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience and understanding. One afternoon, he brought a small notebook and a pencil. He handed it to her without explanation. She looked at him suspiciously. "Just draw if you want," he said. "Or write. Or nothing at all. It's yours." She hesitated, then slowly opened the notebook. The blank pages stared back at her, and for a moment she felt the same fear she always felt when facing something new. But his presence was comforting. She picked up the pencil and started to sketch small shapes, circles, lines, and patterns. She didn't know why, but it felt good to let her hand move without thinking. Days turned into weeks. Her sketches became more detailed. Flowers, birds, little scenes she imagined from stories she had read. Sometimes he looked at them and commented quietly. Sometimes he just nodded. He never criticized, never said they were good or bad. He simply acknowledged her effort, and that was enough. At school, the whispers continued, but she began to respond differently. When someone pointed at her leg or whispered behind her back, she didn't retreat immediately. She stood taller, walked with more confidence. The notebook gave her a sense of ownership, a way to express herself that words couldn't always convey. One day, she brought the notebook to the park and showed it to him. Pages were filled with drawings of the park, of children playing, her own imagination spilling into the margins. "These are amazing," he said softly. She looked at him, surprised. Not because he praised her, but because he had never called her work amazing before. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't try to make her feel better artificially. He simply spoke what he truly felt. Encouraged, she started to share more of herself. She told him about her dreams, little things she wanted to do when she grew up, places she wanted to see, even fears she never admitted to anyone else. He listened patiently, nodding, sometimes adding a quiet story from his own past. He shared tales of trying new jobs, learning to cook for his child, or simple memories of laughing with his late wife. They both learned from each other without realizing it. There were challenges, of course. Not every day was easy. She had moments of self-doubt and frustration, especially when school was particularly harsh. But he never left. Even if he was busy or tired, he found a way to meet her, even if just for a few minutes. That consistency became a lifeline. Sometimes they went beyond the park. He took her to small local events, like the weekend market or the library. He didn't treat her differently from other children. She could choose to walk or be carried. She could speak or stay silent. These outings were simple, yet they brought a sense of normalcy she had rarely experienced. One rainy day, they found shelter under a large tree. Water dripped from the leaves, creating a gentle rhythm. She was quiet, staring at the ground. He waited, understanding that some thoughts were too big to rush. Finally, she spoke. "I hate being different." He nodded slowly. Everyone feels different in some way. The difference doesn't make you less. It makes you unique. "I don't feel unique," she whispered. "I feel broken." He shook his head gently. Broken isn't the same as worthless. You're learning, surviving, and creating. That is strength.
Oh.
Her eyes filled with tears, but not tears of pain. Tears of relief. For the first time, someone acknowledged her feelings without judgment, without trying to fix her immediately. He simply listened and validated her experience. Over time, she began to open her heart more. She laughed more freely. She started to talk to other children slowly, cautiously, testing the waters. She discovered that some peers were willing to be kind if she gave them a chance. That realization was new and thrilling, yet also frightening. Trust had always been difficult. The man never forced her. He gave advice only when asked. He encouraged her in subtle ways, walking beside her, asking questions about her day, or suggesting they try a new activity together. Each gesture showed care without pressure. She began to realize that people could see her without pity. That connection was possible even after rejection. One afternoon, they brought her notebook to the library. She browsed books about art, animals, and faraway places. He watched as her eyes lit up, as she flipped pages eagerly, asking questions and learning. Her curiosity was contagious, and he found himself discovering new things too. Inspired by her energy, they laughed together over simple jokes, small stories, and the occasional clumsy fall she experienced while learning to move faster with her prosthetic leg. Laughter became part of their bond, a natural, comforting rhythm in their meetings. Sometimes she still felt sadness, especially when confronted by old insecurities or rejection from classmates. But now, she had someone to return to, someone who understood her without judgment. She realized that her life was no longer defined solely by her loss. It was shaped by her resilience and the quiet support of the man who had chosen to see her. As weeks turned into months, the bond strengthened. She began to expect his presence in a quiet, comforting way. She knew that no matter what happened, someone believed in her. That simple fact began to change how she saw herself. She was not invisible. She was not defined by what she lacked. She was growing, slowly, courageously, into someone who could face the world, piece by piece. Their story was not about miracles or grand gestures. It was about small acts of presence, the courage to listen, and the power of simply being there for someone who had felt unseen. It was about trust, slowly built, the beginnings of a bond that could change a life forever. She started to smile more. Not forced smiles, but real smiles that reached her eyes. And for the first time in years, she felt a sense of possibility. The park no longer felt like a place of solitude, but a place of hope, of small victories, and the quiet beginnings of a life touched by care and understanding. She realized that change did not always come suddenly. Sometimes it came quietly, in the shape of another person who refused to give up on you. The days grew warmer, and the park became more alive with laughter and running feet. The girl still attended school and faced the usual whispers and glances, but the support she had found in the man gave her courage she had never experienced before. She had learned to speak her mind in small ways, to laugh when something amused her, and to stand a little taller. Even when others looked at her differently, one day the school announced a sports event. It was a big deal, with children from other classes participating and parents coming to watch. The girl had avoided sports for years, afraid of falling or being laughed at. But this time, she felt a strange pull. She wanted to try, even if it was just a little. When she told the man, he smiled softly. "Do you want to go?" he asked. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I might fall." "Then I'll be there," he said. "Fall or not, I'll be there." On the day of the event, the air was buzzing with excitement. Children ran, shouted, and cheered. Parents clapped from the sidelines. She felt her heart race, unsure of whether she belonged among them. The man held her hand for a brief moment before letting go, giving her space, but also reminding her she was not alone. The first event was a small obstacle course. Her legs, one real and one artificial, moved cautiously at first. The other children ran past her, fast and carefree. She hesitated, but then remembered his words. Taking a deep breath, she focused on one step at a time. When she fell on the soft grass, she expected laughter or pity, but instead he clapped loudly, just for her. And something inside her shifted. She got up. Again and again, she tried. Each time she fell, he was there offering a hand or a smile. She started to feel a rhythm, a confidence that grew with every step. By the end of the course, she had not only finished, but had done it with determination that amazed everyone, including herself. Her classmates, who had whispered behind her back, began to look at her differently. Some clapped. Some whispered apologies. She did not need their approval, but their change in attitude made her realize that courage could speak louder than fear. She had faced her insecurities head-on, and it felt incredible. After the event, she sat under a tree, catching her breath. The man joined her quietly. She looked at him and smiled, a real wide smile that reached her eyes. "I did it," she said. "You did," he replied, "and I knew you could." The words were simple, but they carried weight. She realized that his belief in her had always been steady, even when she doubted herself. That belief had given her the strength to try. The experience changed how she viewed herself. She started to approach school differently, not expecting acceptance immediately, but confident enough to participate. Teachers noticed her growing confidence, and some children began to approach her, asking questions or inviting her to join small activities. She learned that change did not happen overnight. But every small effort mattered. At home, her mother noticed the change too. The girl shared stories about the park, the man, and the small victories she had achieved. Her mother smiled, proud but also relieved. She had worried for years about her daughter's loneliness. Now she saw light returning. The man and the girl began to explore new experiences together. They visited the library more often, trying different books and art supplies. Sometimes they went to local gardens or quiet streets where she could practice walking longer distances. Each step, each outing, was a lesson in resilience and trust. She began to see that the world was not as unkind as she had feared. Especially when someone supported her without judgment, there were still moments of sadness. She sometimes thought about the accident, about what she had lost. But those moments became shorter, less overwhelming. She learned to acknowledge pain without letting it define her. The man shared his own struggles, showing her that everyone faced hardships. But how they faced them made the difference. One evening, while walking home after a long day at the park, she asked, "Do you think I'll ever be like other kids?" He looked at her carefully. "You already are like other kids," he said. "Maybe not in the same way, but your courage, your heart, your determination. That makes you more than just like anyone else." She thought about his words as they walked in silence. It wasn't an answer that solved everything, but it planted a seed. She realized that comparing herself to others wasn't necessary. She could be strong in her own way, and that was enough. School continued to present challenges. Some children still whispered or stared. Some teachers still kept their distance. But now, she faced these moments differently. She had learned that she could choose how to respond. She could walk away, answer politely, or even ignore. And most importantly, she had someone who believed in her. Someone who would not leave. One day, a classmate invited her to join a small project. At first, she hesitated, remembering past rejections. But she remembered the obstacle course, the small victories, and the belief that had carried her through. She agreed. The project was simple, creating a poster for the school event, but it gave her a sense of belonging. The children in her group listened to her ideas, followed her suggestions, and included her naturally. It was a small step, but a powerful one. As the seasons changed, so did she. Her confidence grew steadily. She still had quiet moments, days when she felt invisible, but those moments were shorter. She learned to face challenges, to trust others, and most importantly, to trust herself. The park and the man who had entered her life became symbols of hope, resilience, and the power of consistent care. She began to dream bigger. She wanted to try more activities at school, to join clubs, to learn things she had once been too afraid to try. The man supported her quietly, always present, never pushing. He had shown her that encouragement could be gentle and steadfast, and that sometimes presence was more powerful than words. One afternoon, as they walked home together, she asked him, "Do you think people can really change?" He thought for a moment. "Yes," he said. "But change starts with believing, even when it's hard. Sometimes, just believing in someone is enough to help them find their way." She understood what he meant. She had been changed, not by grand gestures, but by steady presence, quiet encouragement, and trust. That realization filled her with hope and gratitude. The man had also changed. In helping her, he had found a new purpose, a sense of connection he had not felt since his own life had shifted years ago. Their bond was mutual, built on understanding, trust, and shared moments that shaped both of their lives. The park, once a place of solitude for her, had become a place of courage. The man, once burdened by loneliness, had found meaning in small acts of care. Together, they were discovering the quiet power of human connection, and how a single bond could alter the path of a life forever. Seasons changed again, and with each passing day, the girl became more certain of herself. The struggles she had faced did not disappear, but they became smaller, easier to manage. Her steps were steadier, her voice firmer, and her smile more genuine. The man who had been by her side continued to guide her quietly, without words of pressure, without force. Simply with presence and understanding, school continued to challenge her, as it always had. Some children still whispered, some still stared, but she no longer felt the crushing weight of their opinions. She had learned that rejection could not define her, and kindness, once received, could be as powerful as any defense. She began participating more openly, sharing ideas in class, volunteering for activities, and even helping others who seemed left out. It was a full circle, one that gave her a sense of purpose and connection. At home, her mother noticed the transformation. Dinner conversations were no longer just about homework or chores. They began talking about dreams, about future plans, about possibilities. Her mother sometimes marveled at her resilience, realizing that the support she had found outside, the home had given her a strength she herself could not have provided alone. The man continued to be a quiet presence in her life. On weekends, he sometimes took her to new places, a small museum, a park across town, or simply a cafe where she could draw and sketch. Each outing was an adventure, a way to experience life beyond the limits she had once set for herself. He never forced her to do anything she did not want to do, but he encouraged exploration in subtle ways. Slowly, she began to trust not only him, but also herself. One day, the school announced a talent show. She had never participated in such events before, fearing embarrassment or failure. But something inside her had changed. She thought of all the small victories, the obstacle course, the notebook, the afternoons spent walking and learning. She decided she wanted to try. When she told the man, he smiled warmly. "What will you do?" he asked. I want to draw something for everyone to see," she said, hesitating. "I don't know if they'll like it." "It's okay," he replied. "It doesn't matter if they like it. What matters is that you do it." On the day of the show, her hands trembled as she set up her easel on stage. The room was filled with parents, teachers, and children. Her heart raced, but she saw him in the audience, nodding quietly. His presence alone steadied her. She took a deep breath and began to draw. Lines flowed from her pencil naturally, images forming of a world she imagined: children running, trees swaying in the wind, sunlight filtering through clouds. The room grew quiet, not with silence of judgment, but with attention. She finished, stepped back, and felt a surge of pride. The man clapped first, and soon others joined. Some children approached her afterward, curious about her work, asking questions. She felt a connection she had never experienced before, a mix of acceptance and recognition. The experience was transformative. She realized that she could face fear, create, and even be celebrated for her efforts. It was not about perfection, but about courage, persistence, and expression. She walked home that day with her head high, a smile on her face, and a heart full of hope. Life continued to move forward. School, homework, family responsibilities, and the park meetings remained constants. But the girl had changed. She no longer defined herself by what she lacked, but by what she could achieve. The kindness she could share and the connections she could build. Her relationship with the man had become a cornerstone of this transformation. Not a parent, not a teacher, but a guide, a supporter, and a friend who saw her fully. Other children began to notice the change as well. Some who had once been unkind now approached her differently, sometimes seeking friendship or guidance. She learned to respond with patience, understanding, and sometimes gentle distance. She realized that not everyone would change, and that was okay. What mattered was the strength she had built inside herself. Her mother continued to marvel at her resilience. Together, they discussed future dreams, from studying subjects she loved to exploring places she had once only imagined. The girl realized that her past, including the accident and the struggles that followed, did not define her future. Instead, it had shaped her character, giving her empathy, strength, and a quiet determination. The man remained an enduring part of her life. He too had changed, finding purpose and connection in ways he had not experienced in years. Their bond was mutual, built on trust, respect, and shared growth. They laughed together, sometimes sat in silence, sometimes explored new experiences. Through him, she had learned that relationships were not only about joy, but about steady presence, understanding, and care. As she grew older, the girl began to dream even bigger. She wanted to help others who felt left out, to show kindness without expectation, to be a presence that others could rely on. The lesson she had learned: the strength of small steps, the courage to face fear, and the power of consistent support became her guiding principles. She also discovered a new sense of family. Not just her mother or the man who supported her, but a community she could influence, inspire, and connect with. She learned that family could be chosen, built on trust and care, and did not always require blood ties. The people who loved, respected, and encouraged her became as important as any biological connection. One evening, as she sat with the man in the park, watching the sunset, she reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the early days of loneliness, the stares, the whispers, and the fear of trying. Now, she felt gratitude, strength, and hope. Life had not been easy, but she had discovered that courage, love, and connection could change everything. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at him, "for everything." He smiled, a quiet, gentle smile. "You did it yourself," he replied. "I only helped you see it." She understood. The true change had been inside her all along, nurtured by consistent care, patience, and belief. She realized that the world was not as cruel as it had seemed. People could hurt, but they could also heal. Connections could be forged even after rejection, and courage could grow quietly, step by step, till it became part of who she was. As night fell, the park emptied, leaving her and the man alone with the stars beginning to shine. She felt a deep sense of peace. She was no longer defined by rejection, but by resilience. She was no longer invisible, but seen and valued. And she knew that whatever the future held, she had the strength, love, and courage to face it, The story of a one-legged girl once rejected had transformed into a story of hope, trust, and the quiet power of human connection. A single person's kindness had changed her life, but the real miracle was the growth she had nurtured within herself. And as she walked home that night under the twinkling stars, she carried not just her past, but the promise of a bright, courageous future.